innovation forum within the next few days. We encourage you to engage with us by sharing what resonates with you in the chat box and also submitting questions through the Q&A. Our guests will have an opportunity to respond to some questions later in our time today. So while we are only together for a brief time, it will be packed with lessons and stories from the field that you can take back to your own community and to your best practices. So we'll start with a brief overview of Vital Village networks and now, or the networks of opportunity for child well-being, followed by remarks from our featured speaker, and I'll have the opportunity to share some questions with our guests today too. And then we'll wrap up with a few announcements about some upcoming opportunities as well. So whether you are joining us for the first time or have been with us for a while, I'd like to offer a very brief overview of Vital Village Networks. We are a collective of changemakers committed to pioneering sustainable approaches to transforming child, family, and community well-being. We are rooted in Boston with a broad web of peers and partners across the country, all connected through the networks of opportunity for child well-being, better known as NOW. We are bonded through our guiding principles of creating shared spaces for belonging, learning, engaging, and transforming our communities together. To learn more about our work and share your own stories, we invite you to visit the Now Innovation Forum, where you can find access to a variety of tools, resources, and stories of leaders working collaboratively to shift what it means for our children, our families, and our communities to thrive. So now that you've been oriented to Vital Village Networks and Now, I'd like to highlight the key questions that we hope to explore through this year's webinar series. And those two questions are, what does it look like to harness, activate, and build community power? What can we learn from resident-led advocacy movements, from voter education, birth equity, food systems, and early childhood education, and their strategies towards self-advocacy, collective action, and legislative change? Whether we're in an election year or not, these questions are imperative to creating a world where our children, families, and communities thrive. So please welcome Vital Village Network's founding director, Dr. Renee Boynton-Jarrett, to share a little bit more about our featured guest.
Thank you, Rhonda, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so delighted to be able to provide an introduction to the incomparable City Councilor Julia Mejia, Councilor at Large for Boston. Councilor Mejia is a tireless advocate for social justice and social transformation. Councilor Mejia truly has a heart for our collective liberation. And in this effort, she has never forgotten her roots and her sense of purpose and the journey that has brought her to this work. She's a brilliant, authentic, and compassionate leader who truly has a heart for collective action. Now, while her bio says incredible things, in her 2 terms on Boston City Council, she's helped pass over 15 pieces of legislation. She currently chairs the Committee on Government Accountability, Transparency, and Accessibility for Boston City Council, and vice chairs the Committee on Education, Housing and Development, and Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development. But how I know Councilor Mejia is someone who sits next to you, rolls up their sleeves, and works deeply as a community organizer who is inspired by and committed to community-driven change. She is a member of our beloved village, and I'm so proud to have had the opportunity to work alongside her. And I'll just share one insight before we get right to our guest of honor today, that tells you everything you need to know about Councilor Mejia. In 2021, Councilor Mejia passed a referendum to have January 14th 2021 named the Irving Goldston Community Health Day on the birthday of Irving Goldston, who was an incomparable community leader whose passing was way too early and way too sudden, who was an incredible health advocate, and honoring the legacy and leadership of Irving with that passing of that Community Health Day, and inviting us all to engage in civic leadership and power to transform health was just incredibly powerful, and tells you everything you need to know about Councilor Mejia's commitment to the people and not just the process and the politics. So welcome, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm such a crybaby. I'm like, oh my God. I feel like my whole world is in one Zoom right now. You know, Dr. Boynton Jarrett, I don't know if you remember, we worked together, and I know we go way back. Even before Vital Village, you were part of a network with Carla Walker, who used to lead the Boston Public Health, a coalition in Dorchester Cares. And through that work, I got to know you. And I was just a parent. Now, I'm not going to say just a parent. I was a parent organizing other parents, and you created an opportunity for me to develop my skills, and had given me the opportunity to participate in a training that was coming here. And I was a Vital Village member, still am, y'all. Once a member, always a lifetime member here. And so I just want to say thank you for seeing me and always creating a seat for me at the table. Literally, I really do appreciate that. So whenever you guys need anything, you know, I always raise my hand. I'm here for all of it. And then Laurie Facina is also here in the Zoom, and she was my executive mentor when I was starting my own little nonprofit organization. And I remember this day like it was yesterday. She had called me a disorganized organizer because I wanted to bring people together, but I didn't have an agenda. I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. I was just leading with my heart. And I was bringing people from very opposing views together to talk about issues of educational equity. And I led with my heart then. And she has always been a champion for me. So it's so good to see you here, Laurie. Thank you so much for always uplifting me. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And Irving was the person who gave me my first job right out of college. I was a community health educator, and she was the one who introduced me to the love of community, and more importantly, to all things that deal with community health, because the social determinants of health really determines everything. I can talk about education, I can talk about housing, I can talk about public safety, but if I'm not talking about health, and the quality of our health in all of these spaces, then it's just a conversation for just another conversation. And so, you know, anchoring a lot of the work that I do, recognizing the social determinants of health as a community health educator back in the 90s, y'all. This was like a long time ago. And to be now in this role as a city councilor, continuing to focus health equity in these conversations and making sure that we're leading with that first and foremost, is what I love to do. And I'm incredibly grateful to be here with you all. I'm sure there's questions for me, and like, I'm not gonna be here talking the whole entire time, but I love the information justice piece, and I just wanna uplift que estoy súper agradecida que no solamente tenemos
I'm
interpretación.
super appreciative that not only do we have interpretation, but we are finding out that our people, right, our Hispanic community, particularly, who is the largest community here in Boston, that we have an opportunity to really express ourselves in our language, in our heart language, like you just shared. And in council, I passed a law that everything that is shared, everything that is shared is shared in the different languages that we use here in Boston, right? So I'm very proud, right, that you are working on this.
I passed an ordinance around information justice, and I was really happy to see the simultaneous translation happening here, making sure that people are able to be fully expressed in their native language, in their heart language, which I love. And so really happy to see that. And excited to dig into the conversation, which is why I'm sure you all invited me here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So first of all, Not that you ever left, but welcome home. Welcome home to the village. It's such a joy and a privilege. So let's jump right in. And for our participants, feel free if you have questions. There's a Q&A icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to drop questions in there. We will get to as many as we can while we have Councilor Mejia with us. So Councilor Mejia, I think you started us off with some really powerful experiences that you've had, and things that shaped your journey and people who shaped your journey. And one question I do have for you was around the transition from your work as a community organizer and essentially still organizing, but what inspired you to run for public office?
You know, that's such a good question. I actually ran by mistake. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, I actually sit in the seat that she left behind when she ran successfully and won, and became the first Black woman to represent us in the House of Representatives in Massachusetts. And when she ran and won, I was one of those super duper stalkers and volunteers. I would show up to all of her events because she was the only city councilor that went to all of my events, whether I was, organizing parents around education or I was doing civic engagement. She was the only one that would show up. And when she won, the Herald had called to ask me how I felt. And then I said, well, she could be the first Black woman to represent us in Massachusetts in Congress, then I could be the first Latina to represent us in the Boston City Council. Now, I had no idea what that meant or what I was getting into. I just said it because she was such an inspiration to me. And that ran in the news and I put it in my Facebook and, Facebook validation, 200 likes later. And people were like, oh, I'll work on your website. I'll help you door knock. And the next thing you know, 3 weeks later, I was mounting a campaign and running for office with the understanding that, it was a citywide campaign and I did not expect to win. I really wanted to run to change the conversation and to demonstrate that everyday people like me with very limited access to resources and networks, that if I had the heart for my people, that I could run, that I didn't need permission. And we won our race in 2019 by 1 vote after a grueling recount. And so I'm glad that I ran and that I won. And, I'm living my purpose. And when you know what your purpose is and you just go with everything that I've been through in my life prepared me for this moment. And I'll end with, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to fight for my community. Because I remember the first time I had to fight, I was 9 years old and I was at the welfare office, advocating and translating for my mother who didn't speak English. And I remember being 9 years old and feeling incredibly disregarded. And I didn't want my mom to feel what I felt. And even though I was only 9 years old, you will always remember something that shaped your life. And that moment, I remember I wanted to make sure that we got what we went there for, which was for food stamps. And I didn't want my mom to, feel the way that I did. So I only told her what she needed to know. And then when it was my turn to translate for my mother, I told the lady that my mom said that she was being really mean, but y'all, my mom did not say any of those things. I did. And so I've been fighting ever since. And I think that, speaking up, even when you don't feel like people are going to hear you, you have to put yourself in a place to know that you are not just advocating for yourself, but you're advocating for the other people who are going to come after you into those spaces.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that you said that just really stood out to me is that you didn't ask for permission. You did it. You did that thing. So our theme, one of our themes for this series and for our work this year is around community power. And so what does community power mean to you? And specifically, what does it look like to activate and build community power?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this process, and Laurie Frasina, who's here, always brings it up is that whenever I got invited to a place, I was the executive director of a little nonprofit organization for parents. But whenever I got invited, I would bring my whole entourage with me, right? Because it wasn't about me as the executive director. It was really about the people that made up the organization. And the real power really lies with the people, not with people who are in alleged positions of power. And so really recognizing that early on has informed a lot of the work that I do on the council, that it is people-led all day, every day. I always say that nothing about us without us is for us, right? And so this whole notion that electeds have the power is upside down, when in reality, the voters and the taxpayers, that's where the real power is. And so we've given up our power. And so that is there. And then the other piece is that people say that I'm their voice on the city council. And I say, absolutely not. I am not your voice. I'm your microphone. My job is to facilitate, right, a process in which you are able to speak for yourself. Because this whole idea that I'm your representative, yes, but I am not your voice. You have your own voice, and creating a space for people to be able to express themselves, right, for themselves is part of this work. And yes, I've passed 15 pieces of legislation. I think I've done more in 4 years than most people have done in 20 that they've been here on the city council. And that has all been people-led. Every single piece of legislation that I have filed and passed has been with the people. That is what power building is all about. And I think that people get really nervous about that, right? Because what we've been doing here is, when you know better, you do better. And when people start recognizing their power, then they start stepping into that power. That's when things really change. So the power building process is really important. And I'll end with this, is that in my last election, I've always been rambunctious, y'all. If anybody follows me, and if you don't, go find me on Instagram. Don't go on Twitter, because Twitter is where all the white supremacists live. But on Instagram, I post all of my videos there. I keep it like just the way that I show up in this world is how I show up in the chamber, because people have a way of trying to water us down so that we could be digestible, right? And I always say, show up as you are. That's power. Being vulnerable and being fully expressed is power. And we have to shift that power and creating space for people to step into their power in ways that we have never seen in politics.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you said is exactly what we mean by healing-centered advocacy, right? It is folks designing and saying, here's what I need in my community, and you being the microphone, and how you're modeling and showing not only to us as a community, but also in terms of sort of mentoring and modeling what it looks like to use my voice when and where I can and how I can. You know, we often hear folks say, well, politicians or electeds or folks in power or quote unquote power have a platform, but we also have a platform. And so I just really appreciate that. One of the things that Renee mentioned, and I heard you also mention, is just about folks who mentored and sort of cared for you and sort of poured into you. Can you talk about the importance of mentorship and the legacy and its legacy in activating and building community power?
Yeah. So, you know, the first person that there's two people that have mentored or at least influenced me. They probably don't even know it. Well, one does, and the other one probably not so much so. But Liz Walker, the Reverend Liz Walker, she was the first African-American news anchor in the state of Massachusetts. All she did, y'all, is one day she went to my high school to share her story about what life was like for her being the first African-American news anchor in the state of Massachusetts. I was so inspired by her. And I was almost 20 by the time I graduated. I was cleaning offices and working at a shoe store, and I was making more money than my mom could ever imagine while still being in high school, having already dropped out. But her story inspired me to the point that I became the first person in my family to graduate high school. And so when we see people who look like us and share their story, we are inspired, right? To say, well, if they can do it, I can too. Now, she didn't go there with the sense of, you know, converting me into a news reporter, right? But she did that just by existing, right? And sharing her journey. And I think that mentoring that's what it looks like, right? Is really creating space for people to see themselves and then coaching them through that process. And I think we talk about building a bench, but when you're a candidate like me and a woman of color, I went to 2 trainings to learn how to run for office, but none of those trainings really prepared me for what it's like to run as a woman of color, right? And so I created an initiative called Political Lab, where we train women and people of color to run for office, and or people who want to work in campaigns. That mentoring is really about creating the next generation of folks who are going to run, because I'm not in this seat to keep it. I'm in this seat to build power so that people who are living the realities can step in it. And that's, I think, the role that I play is a vessel towards that, is really creating that type of environment where people can get inspired to say, I could run for office. And Purple Rain, I know you're in here throwing little hearts. You should run for office, because I don't know if y'all don't know Purple Rain, y'all are missing out. So yes, everybody, I think everybody in their life should at least run once for something, because it teaches you so much about yourself and others.
Yeah. Oh, I'm telling you, I feel like I could talk to you all day, so we're gonna have to find another time to um, to talk more, because I think the other thing that you said is really important. And I was just talking to my kiddo about this specifically with Frederick Douglass, about the idea of making sure that we're also passing the baton and making a way and recognizing that we're not going to be here forever. So we have a job to do while we're here. And instead of trying to be like other people, like, be you and step into it, and you have a voice, you have something to say. So when Renee was introducing you, she mentioned that you founded the parent-led organization Collaborative Parent Leadership Action Networks, or CPLAN, with a group of mothers back in 2016. And to all the mothers, just thank you and hang in there. Um, and at, at Vital Village, we know the power of C-Plan's leadership around educational advocacy and all of those pieces. And so I'd love to know if you can just share your perspective on what true parent leadership looks like, not the come to the table and be at the table parent leadership. But what does that look like, and what needs to be done to welcome and support parent leadership in an authentic way?
Yeah, well, it was through Vital Village that I was really able to develop that muscle a little bit further, right? Through some of the events and training that I was able to participate in, and then realizing that people do invite you to the table, but then they want you to sit in the kids section, right? Or they invite you to the table and they give you the limited menu, like, you can only choose from these 3 things, right? And so that's not real parent engagement. That is actually just show. And so when we think about real family engagement, we have to be ready to have difficult conversations and be honest, because parents don't want to feel like they're getting lip service, because our kids do that to us. We already know what it looks like, right? So real family engagement requires vulnerability and requires us walking into spaces without an agenda, right? And to create the incubator, if you will, and the container for families to decide and to define for themselves what a quality education looks like, right? We did a lot of work around trauma-informed classrooms before trauma-informed was a key, buzzword. And we worked in collaboration with a number of people about trauma, because we couldn't just talk about educational outcomes. We had to talk about all of the things that our little ones were carrying into schools that we had to unpack before they can actually sit and absorb the educational materials that we were offering, right? So a lot of that work was through parents' lived experience. I'm a Boston Public School graduate, I'm a Boston Public School parent. I know what it looks like when I'm not getting, my $15,000 worth of education, and I'm gonna hold you accountable to it. And real engagement requires us having those difficult conversations and then holding ourselves accountable to what it is that we're going to do collectively. And I think that oftentimes things are being done to us without us and for us, without a real seat at the table. And so I think that, as we continue to have these conversations, what I have noticed though is when we're looking even at the violence that's happening in our schools, we're focusing a lot of our energy on students. I think we should start focusing some of our energy in doing parent leadership and conflict resolution, because some of these parents be rolling up in schools, they're ready to fight somebody too. And so there's some work that we need to do. And then the last thing I'll say, and I know where this is, I'm a politician and everything, but the other piece of it is that we've removed spirituality and religion and God from all of these conversations, right? Which I understand, because we have to be respectful. But the thing is that when people don't have nothing to lose, they're gonna show up like they don't have nothing to lose, right? And so there needs to be some conversation about the mental well-being of folks and trying to ground us in something that is bigger than us.
Yeah, and being connected and recognizing that power, whatever that is, because I felt that. I grew up in Detroit, born and raised in Detroit, and I remember asking myself once, what is what would it look like if half of our city, maybe all of our city, wasn't struggling with PTSD, because it has such an impact on how we show up, because we show up ready to protect what's ours. I do have a couple of questions in the chat, and I also know that I want to be mindful of your time, but I think this question is really important. What drives you and keeps you in this work when it gets hard, when you know when just the votes or whatever isn't just enough, right? What keeps you doing this?
That's such a good question.
Came from the chat.
Thank you. I think what keeps me is I always want to be what I didn't have growing up. Like, so I had to be the one that advocated for my entire community because they didn't know how to speak English. I had to be the one, I would go to the welfare office, to the court. Like, I was that kid. And it wasn't until later in my life that I had then acquired some more grown-ups, if you will, who helped, me through some difficult times. And I think I want to make sure that I create either policies, protocols, procedures, or programs that would have made my life a lot easier growing up. I didn't have my own room until I was in the 5th grade. We shared 3-bedroom apartments with people who I didn't even know half the time, right? So, and I was never in one place long enough to make friends. So I was always getting bullied. And so I had to learn all of those things. And so for me, I want to make sure that I am always showing up in ways that I wish somebody would have showed up for me. And, I know that Fabian is here as well, and she's also someone that was part of C-Plan in the early stages when we were trying to create this organization. I think Miss Rains is also in the building, and there's so many women here that are part of the Vital Village family and network who I literally grew up with. When I say grew up with, as a community organizer, that we came up together, and so that's what keeps me in this work, is the people that I have continued to build with and that I will continue to grow with as I go through this journey of fighting for my people. And I say my people, our people, just because we need each other.
Yeah, and thank you, Fabian, for that question. Councilor Mejia, there are a couple other questions. Do you have a moment for?
I have time, right? I don't have something until 2, I think.
Fantastic. So this next question, it says, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on how we realize when we need to speak out on the front line versus when we need to take a step back and show allyship, uplifting those who are more central to an issue. And that was from one of our attendees.
So the question is like knowing when to step up or step to the side.
Yeah, so knowing when we need to be on the front line versus when we need to step back and show allyship or make room for other voices, I think.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most important aspects of community organizing, is being able to literally read the room or read the Zoom these days, right? And recognizing who may need a little bit more coaching, or whom you may need to prompt a little bit more so that they can be engaged, right? I think that's a responsibility of the facilitator, right? To make sure that that space is being shared, because there are some people who show up and they dominate. And I think that for me, because I've always, if you grow up without having a voice, right, all you want to do is utilize your voice in every space that you have. And I think that that's just your natural reaction. But I think it's really important for you to be mindful of other voices. And sometimes you're going to have to step to the side and let other people lead. And that is part of leadership. And I think it's important for us to do that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned from my time here at Vital Village Networks is that we are all leaders and we all have something to offer and a gift to bring. This next question comes from Richard Sussman, and he was saying that he would appreciate knowing how a lot of the thoughts and actions that you shared can be applied at the federal context and for our nation's future.
Yeah. So someone just mentioned my daughter here in the chat. And, when I think about the federal level, I remember 2016 when there was a very interesting election, right? And my daughter woke up the next morning, and she was only 6, y'all, but she asked me this question. She said, "Who won?" And I told her. And then her next question was, "Do we have to leave?" Now, there was a point in time where my mom was undocumented. I became a US citizen through the naturalization process. And I remember feeling so helpless because my 6-year-old, who was the first to be born in this country, was afraid that we were all going to have to leave. And so a lot of the things that are happening on the federal level, local politics matter, right? Because yesterday I was at the Star Market. You don't know how many people rolled up on me and was like, "I need this, this, this," right? Like, all of this could be happening on the federal level, but if we're not paying attention to what's happening here locally, we're done. So I think that I want to stress that, not because I'm a city, councilor, and that's on the municipal level, but right here, right now is where the real power is in terms of our daily, lives. However, on the federal level, there are dollars and legislation that impact us, but those things usually trickle down. It is important for us to understand local, state, and federal politics and how they are all interconnected, right? And creating as many opportunities for that type of cross collaboration across different sectors of government. That's how we build. And I think that what we haven't done here or here in America, and I haven't seen, and I'd like to see more of that, is, bringing municipal leaders and state leaders and federal leaders, together for more coalition building and identifying how we can work collaboratively, because I feel like there's a disconnect. The only elected that I've seen do it well, and of course, not because I'm a big fan, but Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, she brought into, on the federal level, conversations around trauma, poverty, canceling the school debt. I mean, like, she's talking about real things that impact real people on in a real way. And I think that that's a really good example of what's happening on the federal level that's also mimicking and mirroring what we're experiencing here locally. So there is an opportunity. I just think that we need to build that muscle a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I have another question from an anonymous attendee. It says, "I'm running unaffiliated for city council in Western North Carolina, a very conservative county. Mark Meadows is from there. How would you recommend getting support from differing views or politics?"
Yeah, so I decided in my this previous election, I decided that I didn't want any political endorsements. I didn't want any elected officials to endorse my candidacy because I did not want to undermine the will of the voters. I think as you are building your campaign and your platform, if you could center it less on which side of, if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or independent, or you know what, you talk about who you are, what your vision is and what your purpose is, and the ideas that you're going to share to move your city forward, focus on that and not other people's politics, because those things can sometimes get in the way of progress. And I know this because I used to work in the education space prior to starting my own nonprofit, and there was a debate between district, traditional public schools and charter schools. And both teams, right, they had good intentions, but both teams were so opposite against each other that the people who were really losing out were the families that were caught up in other people's political battles. And I want to share that as a candidate, if you remain rooted in your vision and you bring people in, and you inspire them based on what you're going to do, not who you're going to do it for, but like, this is equity for everybody. Like, you're focusing on Black and brown people. Be unapologetic about what it is that you are fighting for, but don't do it. Don't be one thing in one neighborhood and then switch up for another. Just be consistent, and people will respect you for that, even though if they don't appreciate your politics.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is show up as yourself and focus on how you are going to make the change and what you want to see in your vision.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I love that. I know we're coming towards the end of our time. And I think the question that I'd love to wrap up with is, what's one action you would encourage our participants or our listeners to take as they leave this discussion and this conversation with you?
You know, there is a very interesting election this year, like another opportunity for us to show up. And I'm really worried about the narrative. Whereas we are pitting poor people against each other, and we're pitting, like, the whole migrant situation here, at least in the city of Boston, has become really hostile, because there are folks who are saying, you know, I've been waiting, but here are these people coming in, they're getting ahead of the line. Listen, that's the wrong conversation. There is enough for everybody. We have to start working together and tackling that system. Because if we are organizing as a collective, as Black people, as immigrants, as all people, around systemic racism and or access to funding or whatever the case is, then we become stronger, right? Because there is enough for everybody. And I think that this pitting people against each other is really dangerous. And it's also very really intentional. There is no coincidence why all of this drama is happening during an election year. And you even got, I've been heartbroken by the calls that I've gotten from people who I have high regard for and have, you know, who have voted for me, who are so upset about the migrant situation. And I'm like, look, don't you remember being homeless, right? Let's lead with a little bit more love. Let's lead with a little bit more compassion. Let's meet the moment and recognizing that together we can do so much more for everybody. But if we're gonna be pitting people against each other, we're all gonna lose. That's just the bottom line. And I think we have to get ahead of that narrative right now, because it is very divisive and it's also very intentional. And so I just want to leave you with that, is that this world needs a little bit more love and a lot more compassion. And we're not going to get to where we need to be by leaving anyone behind. And I think that that is my message. And I will end with, I always say this everywhere I go, so I got to say it even here in the Zoom, is never leave yourself at the door to make anyone else feel comfortable, right? Never water yourself down so you can be digestible, because if they don't like you, let them choke. And period, full stop. And at the end of the day, you know, we don't have the time nor the moment now is for us to be as loud and as bold as this moment is calling us to be. And that means leading with our heart and compassion. And this is what it looks like to be in a vital village.
Yes.
And being in community with each other. And so, yes, I said let them choke, but not in a bad way. Y'all, I don't want everybody to die on my watch, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, choking in it's a frame of talk. And so people don't know me might think that I'm being a little bit too much, but I am polite.
I want that on a poster. I want to put it over my bed. I want to put it over my daughter's bed. I want to post it in my bathroom. Like, I need all of that. So I'm gonna need you to go ahead and make that a poster. Councilor Mejia, thank you so much for taking time from your schedule to help us launch our 2024 webinar series, for reminding us of the power that we each carry to build the neighborhoods, the communities, and the worlds that we want to be a part of. Thank you so much. We're going to have to get you back. We're going to have to get you on the podcast, all of it, because we just need more of you. Thank you for your work, because it is critical to our collective power, to our health, to our joy. And we are just so grateful for your partnership and being a part of the village. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody wants me to say the thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They didn't want me to say it one more time. I'll say it because they want to. I'm going to try to type, but it's too much. So it's never. So never leave yourself at the door to make anyone feel comfortable. Never water yourself down so you could be digestible. Because if they don't like you, let them choke. Period.
Look, I'm here for it. Thank you so much. We wish you a fantastic rest of the day. For our participants, before you leave, I just have a few announcements about resources and things that are coming up that I would love to share with you. So first things first, following this session, you're going to receive our reflective action guide. That's for your personal use, and it's really designed to help you consider what you heard today and what actions you yourself can take as a result of that might help you build, deepen community power and healing-centered advocacy. And the form is also available in Spanish. Secondly, I just want to share that the Grow Baby Research Network, an initiative of Vital Village Networks, is hosting its quarterly research roundtable on Thursday, March 21st at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. This session is going to focus on implementing the centering parenting model to improve child health and parent satisfaction. So we'll drop a link to that in the chat and hope you can join us. We are also gearing up for the third season of our podcast series, In the Arena with Now, with new episodes that will be airing later this spring. But in the meantime, I invite you to check out our first two seasons, which can be found on the Now Innovation Forum or anywhere you get your podcasts. Also, to learn more about our approach to building community power and healing-centered advocacy, please visit the Now Innovation Forum to check out the Now Playbook, which is a how-to guide to transformative community capacity to advance equity. This guide features tools as well as best practices from coalitions across the country on how to build a new future together. You can also find a dignity-centered guide to reflecting on cooperative funding structures on the forum. This is a guide for exploring funding partnerships that are grounded in equity and power sharing. Finally, thank you for taking time from your day to join us. We look forward to connecting with you through the forum, through our social media, and to seeing you soon for the next webinar in this series, which will take place later this spring. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Take care of yourselves, your families, your communities, and each other. Be well, everybody. Bye.